Let's say that you are given this graph and you are asked to come up with an equation of the form y equals a times cosine of k times x minus b plus c. Hopefully this looks familiar to you. The variables a, k, b, and c might look a little bit different, but generally it's going to look something like this, again, possibly with other variables. Now, the way that I like to think about this is cosine always starts at the top, or at least the parent graph for cosine. So, it'd start somewhere like here, and it would look something like this. And the way that I remember that is cosine starts with C, and so does the word coaster, like in roller coaster. So imagine that there is a little car here, and it's rolling down, and it starts at the top, and it's silly, but that's how I remember it. So I know that my graph, starts here, and it looks something like that. The first thing that I want to recognize is that there is a reflection over the x-axis. So it looks something like that. And the way that that's going to affect our equation is we know that the a value is going to be negative. So we're going to have y equals negative, and then we can identify the amplitude because notice that the lowest the graph goes is here at negative 1/10, and the highest it goes is positive 1/10. So then our amplitude is going to be 1/10. So we have negative 1/10 cosine of, and the way that we are going to figure out k is by looking at the period of this graph. So notice that we have the x value negative pi over 4 here, and the x value pi over 4 here, and that is for half of the graph. And so the distance between negative pi over 4 and positive pi over 4, well, we know that this distance is pi over 4, and we know that this distance is pi over 4. So the total distance, if I added those two together, is going to be 2 pi over 4, or just pi over 2. However, that's just half of the graph, and so if I were thinking about the period from here to here, since half of that is pi over 2, then I know that the period, the whole length there, is going to be pi. And that becomes important because if we know that the period is pi, we also know that that is equal to 2 pi over k. So if I have pi is equal to 2 pi over k, I could solve this equation for k by cross multiplying. That's one way you could think about it. So I'd have pi k equals 2 pi times 1, which is just 2 pi. And then to solve for k, I could divide both sides by pi, and we get k equals 2 in our final equation. So I'm going to go ahead and fill that in our equation. I'm going to have 2 times x plus or minus something, and then notice that the plus c part is for if there were a vertical shift. However, there is no vertical shift happening here, so it would be plus 0 or just leaving that part blank altogether. Now, we want to figure out what the phase shift is, and the original question wants us to utilize a phase shift that's going to give us the smallest phase shift. And so notice that the graph is shifted to the right by pi over 4 units, and so that's going to tell us that we have x minus pi over 4 here. So that concludes this example, and that is the equation for this particular cosine graph.